Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 11th Annual State of the Treasury Profession Message, a new starting line. I'm Kathy Gregg, a Managing Director at Treasury Strategies, and I'm joined here in Chicago today by Tony Carfang, who's also an MD at Treasury Strategies. Hey, while we're looking at this front page, does anybody notice anything different about it from years past? That little tagline underneath the Treasury Strategies logo, a division of Novantas, Inc. Many of you may not know, but Treasury Strategies was acquired by Novantas in the middle of 2016. Novantas is also a consulting firm in a similar space as Treasury Strategies, and we're thrilled about our acquisition. We're doing business as usual, but bigger and better. We have access to substantially more resources, particularly in the quantitative analysis and risk assessment area. So this has just been very exciting for us, and we continue to do our Treasury business as we have for many years. So let's review our introduction and outline for today, which is on the second page of our deck. Our theme for this year, as I said, is a new starting line. And in keeping with that, there are a lot of major implications we see for the Treasury playing field that we're going to cover. And we're also going to go over, of course, your strategies for the year and some considerations for team and resources for Treasury, and finally recap that all off with a discussion of some thoughts that we think you should be considering for your playbook for 2017. Now, usually when we do the State of the Profession message, we start out by recapping the major themes from the last couple of years' messages and congratulate ourselves for being so right on target. And frankly, this year we're going to do the same thing. Last year we talked an awful lot about the need to expect the unexpected, and we focused on that relentless change that has become our daily experience in Treasury, and that certainly is still the case. We also talked a lot about complexity, the fact that there are more moving parts today than ever before, that regulatory issues are just coming at us right and left, and even issues that aren't ours, that maybe are banking or other parts of finance, they end up on the Treasurer's desk. We talked about FX volatility, impending rate changes, and bank turmoil. And as usual, we think all of that was pretty much on target. And frankly, as we prepared for this year's message, we said, hey, we could almost repeat the message from last year, because all of those things are still really true. But there are some really important new additions. We are definitely closing the book on the financial crisis. So we're moving into a new environment where we're on the offensive now as opposed to heads down waiting. We are definitely now, I think after having said this for 3 or 4 years running, we are moving into a period of increasing interest rates, and that's obviously going to affect us in Treasury. And we also see the regulatory pendulum, which had gotten pretty far out on the arc, starting to swing back toward the center. So we may really be seeing the end of an era of regulatory overload, all of which puts us at a new starting line. So to begin with, let's talk about some of the most interesting aspects of this new Treasury playing field. And Tony, I'm going to hand that off to you.
Thank you, Kathy. Welcome, everyone, to today's State of the Profession message. I think one of the most subtle but important things that are happening in the marketplace right now is a move from the post-crisis mentality to as Kathy said, a new starting line. And very subtly, I think we're seeing a shift from multilateral solutions, multi-country solutions to problems and regulations to more of a bilateral methodology. This is subtle, and we'll develop that throughout the presentation this morning. Following the financial crisis, companies came together to solve, and countries came together to solve these problems and to harmonize regulations and global structures. I think we're seeing a reversion back to more of a bilateral environment. Things like Brexit and the U.S. elections, the Italian elections, a number of other things are a break with these multilateral structures that we saw during the financial crisis. We think that indicates on the part of our clients some optimism and some confidence, and it leads to a mood of self-determination, less interdependence. And that means that for corporate treasurers and for banks, that there may be a call for new approaches to doing business at this new starting line, new structures. Corporate treasurers may need to think their sourcing of credit and payment services around the world. Bankers may need to think about some new products and playing against a slightly different set of rules. Multilateral structures like the G20 or the Basel Commission or the Financial Stability Board, frankly, the Eurozone and the G7 and G8, all of those things that developed the global framework over the last 7 or 8 years may diminish in importance. Now, let's drill down into some of these implications. There are going to be new market structures. There are some instruments like prime money market funds in the U.S. that have simply been obliterated. Some sources of credit changing. All of those mean that as corporate treasurers, you need to be on top of these changes so that you can, guarantee your company's access to capital. And as financial institutions, you need to be on top of these changes so that you can continue to be the vehicle for supplying capital and payment services to your customers. We're seeing, as Kathy mentioned, probably higher interest rates, more foreign exchange volatility. I think trade policy is an area that's going to evolve into much greater complexity. As you move from bilateral to multilateral structures, you might, if you consider a trade bloc of 5 countries with a master trade agreement with a trade bloc of another 5 countries, that's just one trade agreement, and it's easy to get your head around one trade agreement. If those were to disintegrate and each of the 5 in Block A develop separate trade agreements with each of the 5 in Block B, we go from one trade agreement to 25 trade agreements, which may have currency implications, cash flow implications, foreign exchange implications, a lot of complexity that you as treasurers need to be staffed up and prepared to deal with, and you as bankers have an opportunity to provide more services to your customers. As we go down the list, we probably see the role of central banks receding going forward. Following the financial crisis, the central banks were front and center and leading with monetary policy, which frankly was very unusual and out of character with the historical norm. Now we may see a reversion back. And then we have the whole regulatory area. And as you know, Treasury Strategies, on behalf of our bank clients and our corporate clients, have commented on the regulatory rollout, both in North America and in Europe. We've testified over, in front of regulatory bodies, and we will continue to do that on your behalf. Treasury Strategies, because of our 360-degree view of both the financial services marketplace and the corporate treasurers who use those services, we're uniquely positioned to advise on these matters. Very quickly, let me say a word about the regulatory marketplace. We're not going to drill down here because you're all very familiar with that. It's important to know, though, that many of the regulations, although they're now 6 or 7 years in development, are still being rolled out, and some of these have a 2018 implementation, 2019 ultimate implementation. We think in the new world order, some of these rollouts may actually be stopped in their tracks, and some may be rolled back. I mean, obviously, everyone recognizes the total debacle in the mutual fund regulations in the U.S., which have shifted $1 trillion from private sector funding of corporations to public sector funding of government, which is obviously a disaster. Things like these may be amended going forward. So when we think about the new implications of the new playing field for corporate treasury, I think we see a world of complexity, and there's lots to deal with. Change in the market participants, questions about where the availability of credit will arise, what investment options corporate treasurers and institutional investors have. We think 2017 is going to usher a new year and a new round of increasing costs of bank services. We think the market conditions are ripe. Banks have newfound pricing power here, and it's going to be important for corporate treasurers and banks both to sharpen their pencils here in order to ensure solid relationships going forward. So with that as a background, let me turn this back to Kathy, who will talk about sort of the optimum game day strategy for you in 2017.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, on to game strategy. So prior to this message, every year, we do a survey to try and understand how Treasury priorities are shaping up for 2017 in the minds of the Treasury practitioners and treasurers, and what kind of information people are really interested in having benchmarks on. And I have some findings here for you. On the next page, we show the top Treasury priorities as you reported in the survey, and we're comparing this to how the rankings of these items stacked up in last year and the year before. Now, this is from a list of 35, so it's a pretty comprehensive list, lots of things to choose from. Interesting, isn't it? You just look at this, and the first thing that strikes you is, wow, this stuff isn't moving around very much from year to year, is it? What does it mean that cash forecasting and financial risk management are number 1 and number 2 for 3 years in a row? Well, it partly could be that these are just simply very important functions in the typical Treasury operation. It may also mean that these are a couple of areas that are always changing as your companies evolve, and as a result, they stay in a very important position. And we think it also may underscore the fact that these are just simply difficult areas to master. It's hard to get these things right, and with all of the turmoil and change, they stay on your radar screen because they are difficult to do very well. The third and fourth items seem to be related, the HR and organizational side of Treasury. Oh, back, Joe, if we could just go back. Thank you. Tony will have something to say about that in a second. And then I want to draw attention to bank service fees, the last item. This is a new item we put on the list this year. And look, as a new item, it's already number 10. Let's flip to the next slide, the benchmarking. So the highest rated areas in which you're interested in having peer benchmarks. Again, there's not a lot of change. Bank service fees, which I said was that new item, wow, it rockets to the number 1 spot the very first time we put it on the list. And once again, you've got the financial risk management and cash forecasting being very high. You've got a cluster of Treasury organization and staffing items here on the top 10 list. So a lot of consistency between these two lists, a lot of consistency between your priorities for the last several years. Okay, so Tony, you have something to say in particular about the resource topic, don't you?
Absolutely, Kathy. So 2017 is a time now to build your A-team. We're moving from the defensive strategies of the last several years now to the new starting line and an offensive strategy. And when we're on an offensive playing field, that means there's more opportunity, but it also means there's more opportunity cost of lagging behind. So we think it's really important to build your A-team. We advise you not to take 108 years like the Chicago Cubs did, but they finally won the World Series this year. Hooray. Well, we're happy about that. But again, maybe 108 days or 108 months, but not 108 years to build your Treasury A-team. It's important to re-equip Treasury to deal with the new market dynamics that we talked about and the new complexities of the environment. And it's important to look beyond the traditional avenues that you look at for building your A-team. It's not just your staff. It's not just your direct reports, your internal folks. It's folks from across the company. Cross-functional teams around your company bring a skill set and in some sense position you more. And we see this in many of our clients, position you more as the general contractor to maintain the firm's cash flows in the firm's balance sheet using a number of other internal players. And then look outside to putting together your external team. There are a number of service providers, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, that can be part of your A team. And then finally, get the tools that you need sort of as the glue to hold this all together. So let's talk about the internal part of your A team. We think it's really important to first think about your ideal future scenario. It's important to think long-term as opposed to looking at where you are now and thinking incrementally about how to get there. You know, in a strengthening economy and with Treasury providing much more value added now to the corporation with credit perhaps becoming less available because of the government crowding out and interest rates getting higher, the value of Treasury professionals is absolutely moving up. There will be turnover. And turnover on your team, while that's not good on the surface, does provide opportunities for moving more quickly to your long-term vision. So first, think about your long-term vision. And categorize the talents that you need to achieve those priorities that Kathy just talked about. What kind of talents do you need in a world where cash forecasting, foreign exchange volatility, bank service charges, relationships, access to credit are taking on more importance. And then think about your short-term needs. What would you ideally like to have in 6 months, 9 months, or a year? And then assess your current staff against that matrix, and then finally develop your A-team roadmap. How do you get from where you are today to where you would like to be in your future A-team scenario? Now, there will be gaps in that, and that's where you plug holes with your internal other internal resources. Your company's IT department, your company's tax department, the business units. Many of our corporate clients say that they would like to be more involved and get involved earlier in business unit activities that impact Treasury. We see in a lot of companies who fail to do this, for example, marketing initiatives around new payment mechanisms that originate in the business units, and Treasury is only brought in at the very end to find a service provider, as opposed to being able to input and add value to the solution. And then finally, as we said earlier, the cost of being average is going up. And the reason it's going up is because the value of being above average is great, and we see that as the future scenario. Now, after you've put together your A-team, let's take a look at external partners to supplement that team. You have bankers, you have advisors and consultants, trade associations, brokers, auditors, a number of services that you can avail yourselves of. We would suggest going across each of those categories and selecting one provider, your best banker, your best consultant, which is Treasury Strategies or Novantas if you're in banking, the best trade associations who can support you. Select one and select them on the basis of their ability to bring you something unique and meaningful and their willingness to invest in you. And after you've done that selection, then you also need to invest in the relationship. This is not a cat and mouse game. This is not pitting your A-team vendors against each other, but rather making them a full partner in your business. If you selected them on the basis of their willingness to invest in you, you need to reinvest back. You need to share your vision. You need to bring them to the table earlier in some of your internal decision making, and you need to compensate for value. And if you do that, you're laying the groundwork for a successful long-term partnership and the A-team. So presuming now that you're on your way toward getting the A-team, let me turn this back to Kathy, who will talk specifically now about the 2017 playbook.
Okay, so we have a couple of thoughts for your playbook for 2017. The pages in your playbook represent the areas that you want to tackle this year, and we've chosen these based on the priorities that showed up in the survey. And whether you delegate these items to be done by people on your team, or do them yourself, or get outside help to help with the harder ones, these are the things that you're going to focus on accomplishing for the year. The first one we picked out is cash forecasting. That was obviously a very high item on both lists. And there are several changes that Tony already talked about when we very first kicked off that are really going to impact most Treasuries' cash forecasting this year. Corporate tax rate changes, possibly, trade pact changes, offshore cash amnesty. Things like these are going to affect your corporate cash flows, along with the standard sorts of things that we've gotten used to, like FX volatility and variations in regional growth patterns and things like that. Your cash forecast should be your leading indicator of how those things are affecting your company. And very importantly, this year, we're going to have real interest rates. We're going to have action in the short-term investment market that we haven't seen for years, I believe. So your short-term investing activities probably need to be re-gunned up. We're going to have an actual yield curve. There's probably going to be a difference between overnight and money that you can put out for 2 weeks or a month. And you're going to need to know that for maximum value of your short-term investments. The opportunity cost of a bad forecast here is actually going to be real, as opposed to what it's been for the last couple of years, which is practically non-existent. This is going to require more than just a cash calendar. Lots of companies say they have a forecast, but really it's a calendar. They just calendarize major cash inflows or outflows that they're aware of, but they're not able to take a look at the cash flows coming off the businesses or being required by the businesses and factor that in. Oh, by the way, many of the people on your team may never have been in Treasury when there were really interest rates, so this is going to be a completely new experience for them. So getting a workable, valuable forecast is one of the least cookie-cutter parts of the entire Treasury function. It is not something that's taught in business school. It's difficult to learn how to do because it requires, to do a good one, you have to have some experience at building forecasts. It's sort of, you know, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? If I have no experience, how do I get experience? It requires problem-solving skills. It isn't intuitively obvious in most cases how to deconstruct cash flows so that you can forecast them very easily. And it requires iteration. You're never going to get the forecast right on the first go-round. We know this from all of the work we've done for our clients in forecasting. I strongly suggest here if forecasting is going to have some big impact on your company, you might want to get some help. It's just one of those areas that would benefit a lot from it. Second page in the playbook is Treasury technology, again, something that was high on the priorities list. Most companies over $1 billion have technology in place. At least 2/3 of them have a Treasury workstation or an ERP Treasury system. And over 40% of all companies plan to invest in more technology this year. We think, and we have statistics that say, Treasuries are still underutilizing their technology. 4 out of 10 firms aren't leveraging, they say they're not leveraging all the available functionality that they've purchased. And another 4 out of 10 firms say their reporting doesn't fully meet their needs. What is your technology about if it isn't the reporting? Now, our technology practice over the years has developed an approach to this that is much better than just saying, let's chuck everything we have and start over again. Frankly, a lot of people can't afford that. They don't have the time. They don't have the money. We've developed an optimization process that helps you implement missing modules, tweak your configuration, add some bolt-on software, maybe build better reports. Anyway, your technology needs to be in your playbook because it is downright silly not to get the maximum value from the biggest investment Treasury's made. A third page in your playbook has to do with your organization. These items were pretty high on your rating list. Functional organization, what does this mean? Restacking, restructuring the group, looking at who's responsible for what gets done in Treasury maybe versus in the business units versus in FP&A. We're not completely sure what it means at every company, but it may mean that some change or restructuring is on the horizon. I want to first speak to new treasurers about this. New treasurers, the first few months you're in the job is the best time to take stock and make structural changes. And for you, we've just produced a book called The First 100 Days, where we surveyed a couple of hundred treasurers and asked what did they do during their first 100 days in that job that helped them be successful. And we're happy to share that with you new treasurers. If you just send us a note in the Q&A section, we'll get in touch with you and send the book to you. Those of you who work for treasurers, we want to talk about if change is coming, where do you want to be? And you might want to think about that. In doing that, think about what kind of treasurer you work for. There's two kinds of treasurers, balance sheet treasurers, income statement treasurers. Balance sheet treasurers are more concerned with things like capital structure, interest rates, balance sheet categories. Income statement treasurers are more focused on financial operations, efficiency, payments, things like that. So depending on what kind of treasurer you work for is going to define what sorts of expertise they think are more significant for the Treasury function. So if you're thinking about planning your playbook in your growth areas for this year, what kind of ideas are going to appeal to your kind of treasurer? And by the way, whether or not you're going to have structural change, this is a good thing to be thinking about, right? Because you always need to be advancing your own skills and expertise. So if you're working for a balance sheet treasurer, you might want to be thinking about, do we need a policy update for our short-term investing? Maybe I should work at updating what are the good short-term investment options for the company now that we're going to have some interest rate action. Forecasting to feed the short-term investment activity. If you work for an income statement treasurer, you might want to be thinking about payment mechanisms and payment platforms or fully automating the receivables processes. Those are just for instances. Do something, become an expert in something that matters to the person you're working for. Okay, and the last page that we pulled out for playbook possibility for this year, bank service fee management, that new item in the survey that rocketed to the top. We think that the stars are aligning for bank price increases. Much of the news that's going on is better for business. We're going to have an improved economy. I'm the optimist here, obviously, very optimistic about this. We're going to see some regulatory easing. That's going to create a more favorable environment for the price increases that your banks have been sitting on for the last couple of years. Rates are going to be rising, so your ECR should be rising too. And you're going to need good dashboards that tell you what you want to know, what you need to know at a moment's notice. Most companies recognize the need for this, but most companies also don't have the time it takes to get into this stuff every month. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of detail to sift through. They can't keep up with it. Treasury Strategies is bringing some awesome new tools to this challenge for 2017. I don't have time to go into that, but if it's an area of interest to you, again, give us a note in the Q&A section, and we'll be sure to get you some information on it. So to wrap up, we are really happy that you joined us today. Thank you for spending this morning with us. I suggest that after you're off the call, you just take 10 more quiet minutes to think about what pages need to be in your playbook for the year, how you're going to get them done. If you're going to need help or somebody to discuss those with, give us a call. We have a freakish amount of experience in the Treasury field and solving Treasury problems, and we're happy to talk to you about this. So make 2017 the best Treasury year ever. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for joining us.